function. What is a function? So function is a set of statements. Function is a set of statements upon calling will perform certain task. What is a function? A function is a set of statements upon calling will perform a certain task. So don't worry, we will see each and everything with an example. Try to understand these statements right now, right? So function is a set of statements that upon calling will perform a certain task, right? Once we create a function, we can use that function any number of times. So this is nothing but code reusability. Once we create a function, if we want to use that function at multiple places, then we can use that function. So this is nothing but code reusability. Very important. What is the use of the function? It's code reusability, right? We can create a function and we can use that function any number of times, right? So another important point. So in Python, we can call that as a function, right? In other languages, we call them as procedures, stored procedures, or subroutines, okay, etc. Or I can see in Java, we can call these functions as methods. In Java, we can call these methods as, these functions are methods. Very important. In other programming languages, like if you can take SQL, in SQL, you call them as a stored procedures. In other language, you can call them subroutines. Or in Java, you can call them as a method. But in Python, function and method is different. Method is different in Python. So what is the method, right? We will discuss in the next class, don't worry. But right now, we just focus on only on function. So what is a function? A function is a set of statements that upon calling will perform certain tasks. Very important. What is the use of the function? Code reusability. So what are the other names of function? Procedures, subroutines, and methods. So function and method is different in Python. Very important, right? There are two types of functions in Python. One is built-in functions as well as user-defined functions. Very important. User-defined functions. So when you install Python software, so along with Python, you will get some functions. Those are nothing but built-in functions. So functions come along with Python software are called as built-in functions, right? But these functions, nothing but user-defined functions. These functions are developed by programmers or developers. Functions developed by programmers, or I can say developers, right? Programmers. So simply I can say developers. According to business logic are called user-defined functions. So functions come along with Python language or software. When you install new machine are called as built-in functions, but functions developed by developers according to business logic are called as user-defined functions. Very important. Built-in functions as well as user-defined functions. So what are the built-in functions which we are available in Python? If you can say ID. So whenever we are discussing mutable and immutable concepts, right? So we have discussed one function, right? ID, to check whether the memory is changing or not. Similarly, type, we can check what is the data type of that particular variable by using type function. Similarly, input. So we will discuss input eval later words, but right now these are the functions which come along with Python. Similarly, eval, etc. So these are nothing but built-in functions. So the functions which come along with Python software are called as built-in functions, right? ID, type, input, eval, etc. So coming to user-defined functions, these functions are not come along with Python software, but these are explicitly defined by developers. So these are written by developers according to business logic. So these are nothing but user-defined functions. So for this, we no need to write any syntax, but coming to user-defined functions, the functions which need to be developed by a developer, they need to follow some syntax. What is the syntax? So this syntax we will be using as a testers, as a developers in order to create our own function, we will use this syntax to create user defined functions. Very important, very important. Try to listen it carefully. Very important. So what is the syntax? What is the syntax to create user defined functions? So first thing is you will use def keyword. So as I have said you before, def is a keyword in Python, and thereafter you will have function name, and thereafter you will pass parameters. For this function, you will pass parameters. Don't worry, all the things you will learn one by one. But right now, you should follow only how to use the syntax of these user-defined functions. And inside the function, you will have statements to be executed. So these statements are nothing but set of statements. You will have suppose some 10 to 15 statements. You can accommodate that statements in the function, right? And you can call this function any number of times, right? And similarly, this function may return some result or may not return some result. Return result. Don't worry, you will understand each and everything when we are discussing an examples. Don't worry. Right now, what you should try to understand how we can create user-defined function. So this is the syntax. First, you will use def keyword. Similarly, you will use function name, right? And thereafter parameters. You can pass the parameters, right? For a function, you can take parameters or may not take parameters. So, and inside the function, you will have statements to be executed. And similarly, a function may return or may not return a result. Don't worry about the result, because the result which is coming upon performing certain steps will be returned. That's what here I have mentioned. So don't worry about the result, only worry about the return. So a function may return a value or may not return a value. It is to be clear. Very important, right? We have seen the syntax. Good. Then how I can declare a function in the same format and how I can call that function. Right? Let me make you clear with an example. Declare and calling a function. Declare is nothing but writing. How you create a function. Declaration is nothing but creation. Calling a means invoking. You can call that function, right? Let me create one function. Let me show you so that you will understand better. So let me create one function. Suppose. So instead of creating it here, let me create here. So declaration or creation and calling a function. So this is the syntax which I will be using. So as I have said you before, for a function, def keyword, function name, parameters and statements as well as return. May return or may not return. This is optional. And parameters is also optional. Don't worry, all these points are mentioned in my material. Each and everything like def, what is diff, what is function name, what are the statements. Don't worry, you will understand better. Right now we will see one example. So if you can see, a function should be defined with def keyword. Good. Let me give you the function name. Suppose this is the function name. Greet is the function name, right? So starting with the def keyword along with the function name. What is the function name in this case? Greet. Greet is the function name. So for this function, I have to pass a parameter. So this parameter I can pass or I may not pass. This is optional. Parameters is optional. So in this case, what I'm doing, I'm just passing one parameter. What I'm passing name. Name is my parameter here. Parameter is nothing but argument. Parameter here, it is nothing but argument. Don't worry, mention this point as well. Parameter or argument. Parameter or argument or input values. These are multiple names for the functions, but in general, we will use parameters or arguments. Right? We will not use input values, but these two are very popular, parameter or argument. So in this case, I have passed name as a parameter. So for every function, indentation is very important. So for indentation, when you define a function, you should mention colon here. Def keyword, function name, as well as for that function, we can pass parameter or argument. This is optional. You may pass or may not pass. You will see in further examples. Don't worry. Right now, I'm just passing a parameter or an argument. And similarly, once you put colon here, once you click on enter, see automatically this cursor is highlighted here. No, it's not highlighted here because when you define a function, all the statements which are to be executed will be inside the function, not outside the function. So that is the reason when you click on enter, the cursor has moved to this particular point. So what I'm doing, I am just only giving one particular statement here. Out of multiple statements, what I'm doing, I'm giving only one statement, print off. I'm just printing one name. So don't worry what this f right now. So you just try to use hello. So hello, and you should specify the name. So when we are discussing formatting the strings or formatting the output, you will get to know what is f or semicolon here. Like or just for your information, let me remove all this without confusion. Name. Let me print name here. So this is the function. Inside the function, this is the only statement which I have. So or you can say you can have another statement as well. Print off, like 10 plus 20. 10 plus 20. So as I have said you before, a function may return a value or may not return a value. So in this case, I am not returning any value. So this is the function declaration. Yes, I have declared and created a function. This is the function declaration or creation. Then how I can call or invoke a function? How can I call this particular function? So if I want to call, what I will do, I will just specify that name of the function, and with brackets. In the brackets, if the function is accepting any arguments or parameters, you should pass. Otherwise, you should not pass, right? So in this case, it is accepting some argument or parameter. So what is that? 1 second, is this recording? Yes. So what is that I need to pass? So here name, I can pass any name here. Name is nothing but a string, right? So what is the string? Like Suresh, I can pass. So let me print this. So once you write any code, not only this function, any code, just to right click here. When you click on right click, it will highlight all the options. So right now we are just running this particular code. So let's just run functions. Functions is nothing but the module name, right? So if you can see this particular thing, nothing but calling a function. Inside a function, these are the steps. So for this function, I have passed Suresh as an argument. So instead of name, nothing but an argument. For this argument, I'm passing Suresh as a name here. Value here. So what it is doing, that name is passed to this print statement. It has printed Suresh. Good. And thereafter, I have use another statement with print like 10 plus 20. It has printed the same. Upon calling a function, it will perform certain operations. These operations will be nothing but printing, like addition or subtraction, anything. So in general, what is a function? A function is a set of statements, right? Upon calling a function, will perform certain tasks or operations, right? This is what about a function, right? How we can create a function and how we can call or invoke a function, right? How we can create this. Similarly, as I have said you before, a function may take arguments, may not take arguments. Similarly, a function may return value or may not return a value. So in that case, we will have 4 types of combinations. A function does not take arguments and does not return any value. Similarly, it will take arguments, it will not return any value. Similarly, it will take arguments, it will return value. It will not take arguments, but it will return value. So these are 4 types of combinations with arguments and return values. Let us see one by one example. So I hope you are clear up to now. This is how we define a function and how we can call a function. So arguments, with arguments, without arguments, with the value and without return value, right? So in this case, I will take one example. Let me define a function. Define my function. Function name is here my function, right? So in this case, what I am saying, the function cannot take not take arguments and does not return any value. Then in this case, what is how the function looks like? This is the definition, diff keyword, and this is the function name. And for the function inside the brackets, you are not passing any arguments because it will not take any arguments. And similarly, not returns any value. Let me create one thing. So one statement, print off. Just I will print hello. Print off hello. So this is the function defined or created. So what I am doing, I am calling that function. So upon calling, what it will do? Define my function, right? Yes, this is the function. Let me comment this. So upon calling, it will perform certain operations or statements. It will execute certain statements. What are the statements inside this particular function? Print is the statement. Let me execute this. So if you can see, upon calling the function, it has executed certain statements. In this case, only one statement is present, printing that hello. It has printed the same, right? Similarly, another important point, a function may return or may not return a value. In this case, if you can see, I have not specified any return word here. So if I does not mention any return word, it will return me nothing. It will give nothing. Means it will not print anything upon calling. So let me show you that as well. So print of my function, print of my function. So this function will return nothing. It is not returning anything. Instead, it is only executing this statement, and it is not returning anything. You bear with me, it is a little bit confusing for you, but upon practicing, you will get to know what is returning, what is not returning. Don't worry. So in this case, this function is not returning any value. So what it will print, if it is not returning, it will print none, right? So if you can see, my function, I have called the function. Inside the function, what it is there, printing the hello is there, right? It has printed. Similarly, in the another statement, I am calling this function. So upon calling the function, it will print the statement inside this. So along with that print, this function is returning nothing. So if it is returning nothing, this print statement prints none. This print statement prints none. Bear with me, it is a little bit confusing. Don't worry. You will understand upon practicing. Similarly, a function with arguments but no return value. A function with arguments but no return value. Let me take this example. Let me take this example. So if you can see, this is the similar example which we discussed earlier. So let me take greet of, like, let me take Suresh. This is the function. It will take arguments, right? If you can see the difference between, it will not take any arguments. So that is the reason why you have not passed any argument or parameter here. But coming to this type of example, this function takes an argument and it is performing some operations on that argument, right? So whether it is print or some addition, anything, right? So it will take arguments, but it is not returning any value. So let me try to print. So for right now, let me comment this. This is example is completed. Yeah, it has printed only Suresh. And similarly, if it does not return anything, if this function does not return anything, it should print none. So similarly, print of greet of Suresh, because this function is anyway taking arguments. So that is the reason why we have specified the name value here. If you can see, it has printed twice Suresh because twice the function is invoked here and here. And similarly, this function returns nothing. So that is the reason it has printed none. Similarly, with arguments and with return value, let us take this another example. So suppose let us define one function, calculation function, cal of. So what I am doing, I am taking two arguments, a comma b. So what I am doing, I am just return a plus b, sum of a and b. So what I am doing, I am taking, this function takes two arguments. It is taking with arguments, nothing but two arguments, and it is returning value. What it is returning, the sum of these two arguments, a plus b, a plus b. So in this case, so what you will do, if you just only call 10 comma 20, this is the function call. So in the function, it is taking two arguments, a and b. So for this a you are passing, for this b you are passing value, a is 10, b is 20. So if you just execute this, let me try to comment this. It will not print anything because inside the function you have not written any print statement, but this function is returning value. If it is returning value, you have to use print statement, print of, you have to pass the argument values. So if it is returning, you have to use print statement, thumb rule. In this case, you can see 30 is the value because this function is returning. If it is returning, you have to use the print statement. If it is not returning, if you use print statement, it will print none. This is the examples, like the example 1 and example 2, which you see as a part of no return value. If we use print function in that case, we will return none. It will return none. So in this case, another example, a function with no arguments and with return value. It will not take any arguments, but it will return value. So how this, let us see this one particular example. So let me define one particular function. Suppose func. So inside the function, it will return just 10. So just for this example, it will not take any arguments. If you can see, this function will not take any arguments, but it is returning some value. What is that value? It is returning some random value. In this case, I have taken some 10. You can take any value. So if it is returning, I have to use print statement, print of function, right? If I use print statement, it will print that return value, what it is returning. But if I use only function, it will not print anything because inside the function, if I use only bare function, then it will not print anything. If you can see, this particular function is not returning anything, printing anything, because inside the function, there is no print statements. But this function is returning. If it is returning, then I have to use print statement, right? It is returning. You have to print that. So that is the reason why I'm using print statements. So in this way, you can define a function, right? You can define a function or declare or create a function, and you can call or invoke that particular function. Similarly, there are 4 types of examples you can see. A function can take arguments, but not returns value. Similarly, It takes arguments but no return value. With arguments and with return value. These are all the examples. So these examples I have mentioned in my material. Don't worry. You will see a step-by-step example clear. I hope you are clear up to now. This is what about functions, how we can define or declare a function, right? Similarly, there are two types of variables. There are types of variables. So there are, types of variables. So before going to types of variables, we will see what is a variable. You know already what is a variable. A variable is a container which can hold some data, right? What is a variable? A variable is a container which can hold some data. So that can be of any data type. So in Python, there are two types of variables. One is global variable and the other is local variable, There are two types of variables in Python, right? Let me make you clear. Global variables as well as local variables. Global variables as well as local variables. Let me make you here only. So one is global variable and as well as local variable. Global variable as well as local variable. You should be very thorough with this. So what is a global variable? So variables which are declared outside a function, are called global variables, right? So variables which are declared outside a function are called as global variables. Then what are local variables? Variables, so this is like in the similar definition only, like variables which are declared inside a function are called local variables. Variables which are declared outside a function are called as global variables, and variables which are declared inside a function are called as local variables. So coming to global variables, so once you define a global variable, these variables can be accessed for all functions, right, of that module. So what is a module, what is a function, what is a library, we'll say you at last. Don't worry right now. So once you define a global variable, right, these variables can be accessed for all the functions of that module. Don't worry, what is a module? Again, what is a library? What is a function? We will see in three simple words at last, right? Similarly, what about the local variable? So once you define a local variable, these variables only available for the function in which we declare. That is, I can say like it is not accessed outside a function. Very important point. So once you define a local variable, in which place or in which function you define that variable, it will be accessed to that particular function only. If you have some 10 functions, if you define a local variable inside some fifth function, that local variable will be available only for fifth function, but it is not available for other functions. Out of 10 functions, only available for fifth function. So in this way, it is only available for the function in which we declare, but it is not accessed but to other function, nothing but outside function, simply I can say. Right. See, in order to define a global variable, you will use global keyword. Very important. Inside a function, if you want to define a variable as a global variable, you will use global keyword. Very important point. So what is the use of global keyword? To declare a variable, simply I can say it is nothing but a global variable inside a function. So we will use global keyword. So similarly, to make global variable available to the function so that we can perform required modifications. Very important concepts today. Function Local variable, global keyword. So what is the use of global keyword? To declare like global variable inside a function. So if you define a variable outside a function, it is nothing but a global variable. But there are some cases you should define a global variable inside a function. So in that case, you will use global keyword to declare a variable, global variable inside a function. Similarly, to make global variable available to the function so that we can perform required modifications available to the functions. So we can declare a global variable inside a function also. So if you declare a global variable inside a function also, it will be available to suppose 10 modules of that particular, 10 functions of that particular module. Right? So let us see one by one example. What is a global variable? What is a local variable? Let me create one Python file like local and global variables. Right? So let me take example one. So in this, we will discuss about what is a global as well as local variable, how we can define. So let me take one example, global. Suppose I am defining just one variable name as global var, right? So let me define that as 20. Similarly, let me define one function, define a function of, and inside the function, I'm just defining local variable. So just for your understanding, these naming conventions are taken. So local var is equal to 10. So what I'm doing, I'm just printing local variable. Similarly, I'm just printing global variable. Similarly, right? So I'm just invoking that function, calling that function. Similarly, I'm just printing local variable, right? Similarly, I'm just printing global variable. If you can see, this is nothing but a global variable. This is nothing but a global variable. Why it is a global variable? If you see this particular variable, nothing but global var. In this case, I have given you this particular name just for your understanding. Instead of global var, what I can put here also. So any variable which is defined out, this is the function, right? If we define any variable outside a function, it is nothing but a global variable. If I define any variable inside a function, it is nothing but a local variable, right? Local variable. So if variable defined inside a function is nothing but a local variable, and if we define a variable outside a function, it is nothing but a global variable. This is the clear-cut example, right? So local variable is created inside a function, absolutely right. And if I want to access local variable, it should be accessible only inside the function which it is created. So for this function, it is created. So that is the reason it is only available to this. So if you can see, I'm just printing the local variable outside this particular function. So that is the reason why it has written unsolved reference, because this local variable is not accessed outside the function. Local variable only refers to local scope, right? To the function which is it is defined. But coming to the global variable, even though I have used this global variable outside this particular function and inside the function, it is trying to access that variable, because if I have multiple some 10 functions like this global variable will all be available for all the functions in that module. So this is global variable and this is local variable. Global variable can be accessed from anywhere in that module. Similarly, but local variable only accessed in the function to which it is defined. So that is the reason why you have used it here. But if you want to print it outside, you will get some error. Let us try to execute the same. And similarly, I'm just invoking this function, nothing but calling the function. Let me try to execute this. If you can see, local variable is not defined because it is already defined where it is defined inside a function. But what I am doing, I am trying to access that particular variable outside the function. So that is the reason it is getting name error, because local variable is not defined, right? So if in this case, I can access only global variable. Let me try to remove this. Let me try to print. So if you can see, global variable can be accessed inside a function as well as outside a function. So in this way, you can understand what is a global variable, what is a local variable. What is a local variable? Another example. Suppose another example. Example 2. Very important examples these are. Suppose this is global variable and this is local variable. There may be chances local variable name, global variable name should be same. Let us try to take similar example. Let us try to see. So let me try to take, suppose where is the name of the global variable. Similarly, where is the name of the local variable, right? So in this case, what it will do, it will override the value of global variable. If you can see, global variable name is var only, local variable name is var also, right? It is nothing but same names of local and global variables. In this case, what it will do, the variable name or value will be overwritten by local variable. This is very important. Let us try to execute this thing. Yes, let me try to comment this just for now. So what is example 2? Local and global variables having same name. So the global variable value will be overwritten by local variable value because both are same. So in this case, it will only print local variable value. So in this way, it will overwritten the values. It will overwritten the values. So this is the best example of local and global variables. There are some more examples I have given you in my material. Just practice that, just for your information. Right now, this much understanding of what is a function, what is a local variable, and what is a global variable is required. All right, and similarly. So whenever we are defining a function, you have seen that the function may take parameters or arguments. These are optional. These are optional, as I have said you before. But how many types of parameters or arguments present in Python? How many types of parameters or arguments present in the Python? So let me make you clear with these things. Arguments in Python. Arguments in Python. So if you can see, there are 3 types of arguments. There are 4 types of arguments actually, but only in general we will only use 3 types of arguments most commonly, right? But let me define you each and every argument right now. So positional arguments, right? Similarly, keyword arguments, right? Similarly, default arguments, right? Similarly, variable length arguments, all right? So there are 4 types of arguments in Python. So these arguments are nothing but parameters which are passed to a function, right? So these are 4 types. One is positional, keyword, default, as well as variable length arguments. So let us try to see one by one example, but in common we will use these 3 type of arguments. So I will discuss these examples right now along with their definitions. So positional arguments, right? What are positional arguments? So these are arguments passed to a function in correct positional order. So very important point. These are the arguments passed to a particular function in correct positional order. Very important, but you will not understand based on these statements. But right now, just bear with me for some more time. I will make you clear with examples. So what are positional arguments? These arguments passed to a function in correct positional order. Similarly, number of arguments, right, and position of arguments must be matched. Very important point. Number of arguments. Suppose if you have passed some 10 arguments here, 10 parameters here. So similarly, you should put 10 position of arguments with values in the function during invoking. So you will understand this when I am making you clear with an example. Don't worry. If we change the order, then result will be changed. Right? This is one important point for positional arguments. Similarly, if we change the number of arguments, then we will get error. So what are the important points about positional arguments? So these are the arguments passed to a function correct positional order. Number of arguments and position of arguments must be matched. If we change the number of arguments, then we will get error. Similarly, if we change the order, then there is a chance the result may be changed. Right? So let us see one by one example once we define a positional as well as keyword arguments as well. Right? Similarly, what are keyword arguments? We can pass values by keyword. So in which name you define the parameters or arguments. So by using that name only, you will try to pass the values by to that particular function. So I can say keyword. It is nothing but parameter or argument name. Similarly, order of arguments is not important. Order of arguments is not important. Order of arguments is not important. So, but number of arguments must be matched. Number of arguments must be matched. Right? This is little bit confusing thing for you, but coming to functions, types of global variables, and coming to arguments, these are one set which you want to practice a number of times so that you can have some clear understanding. Right? Coming to another type of argument, it is default arguments. So we can pass default values for positional arguments. So actually you will have positional arguments. If you pass some default values, then these are nothing but default arguments. So if we are not passing any value, right, any value, then the default values will be taken. So if you are not passing any value, then the default values will be considered. So another important point, this can be, this you can expect in interview. After default, try to listen it carefully. After default, arguments, we should not take non-default arguments. If you are not passing any value, then the default values will be taken in the part of default arguments. Similarly, after default arguments, we should not take non-default arguments. Right? So this is the main things about positional, keyword, as well as default arguments. We will see this with one example. You will understand with a better way. Right? So let me try to create one Python file here. Arguments. So let me define one function. My function. Right? My function. So this is the function with the name my function. Right? So I'm just passing three variables here. Variables are nothing but parameters, nothing but arguments. A is one argument, B is one argument, C is one argument. Right? So I have to close this function with semicolon, and similarly, what I'm doing inside the function, I'm just having some statements. So I'm just having only print statement here. I'm just printing A, B, C. Right? So what are the values I am passing to A, B, C, which are nothing but arguments to this particular function? What this function should do, I have to print those in the console. So this is the function declaration or creation of a function, right? Similarly, a function may return result or may not return result. In this case, this function is not returning any value, just instead it is printing. If it is printing inside the function, similarly, I can just invoke that function. So I can pass the values to these arguments. So for A, what I will do, I will just pass 10. And similarly for B, I'm just passing 20. For just to see, I'm just passing that. Right? If I can see, I can print and run these arguments. It is printing A 10, B 20, C 30. So in this way, you can pass the values to arguments. So these are nothing but positional arguments. These are nothing but positional arguments. So positional arguments are nothing but we can pass the values, right? So I want only for A it is 10, B it is 20, it is 30. But if we change the order, then the result will be changed for the positional arguments. So let me try to make you another example. So in this case, what I'm doing, I'm just changing the values. If I change the values, see, if you can see, A is 10 here, but I want A is only 10, but in this case, it is 20. So if we change the order, then the result will be changed. So if you can see here, so the result is changed. So this is the another example of positional arguments. Another important point, you should pass the values in correct positional order. If you change the order, the result is changed. So this is about positional arguments. Then what is keyword arguments? Let us try to make you clear. Keyword arguments. So keyword here, it is nothing but parameter. So what you will do, you will just specify the parameter here. A is equal to 20, B is equal to 10, suppose C is equal to 30. So what you are doing, you are just passing the values with keyword name or argument name. So these are nothing but keyword arguments. Suppose A is equal to 10, I want, B is equal to 20. So this is keyword arguments. You are just specifying the parameter name of that particular function and that associated value here. This is keyword arguments. If you can see, let me try to comment this positional arguments. So it will print in the correct order only, but there is no change even if you change the order. Let us try to see this with example. If you can see, I'm just changing the order. Suppose B is equal to 20, Control X, B, right? I'm just what I'm doing, I'm changing the order. But even though if you change the order, there will be no change in the result because you are just specifying the keyword here, argument name here. So that is the reason wherever you specify, that argument will take that specified value. Let me try to run this. If you can see 10, 20, 30 only. So in this way, even though if you change the order, there will be no change in the result in keyword arguments. In keyword arguments, right? This is very important point. Similarly, you can mention the keyword and positional arguments in one place. Similarly, you have seen positional keyword arguments separately. Right now, what you will do, you will try to see keyword as well as positional arguments in one place. Positional plus keyword arguments. So what I am doing here, suppose 10, 20, C is equal to 30. So in this example, what you are seeing, I am just specifying 10, 20 as positional arguments, but C as keyword argument. So combination of positional as well as keyword. If you can see 10, 20, 30. So it is the same order which we can print as like a positional argument. Similarly, if I specify the things here like B is equal to 20 also, B is equal to 20 also, positional plus keyword arguments example. In the same order only, it will try to print. Similarly, it is very important point. It is very important point. Right? You should try to take this. After default arguments, we should not take non-default arguments. Simply what I can say, positional plus keyword arguments are nothing but default arguments. Default arguments. What you are doing, A is 10, B is 20, C is 30. C is 30. So what you are saying, for C, you are already specifying some default value here. If you are not passing anything, suppose let me try to exclude this. So I don't want to make this to be disturbed. Let me make it clear with another example. If you can see what you are doing, you are just specifying C is equal to 30 here. C is equal to 30 here. So whenever you are defining a function, there are 3 arguments in that particular function. So in the 3 arguments, you are just specifying default value. Some 30. For C, you are just specifying 30 as a default value. Suppose whenever invoking the function, if you are not passing any value to C, then it will directly take this. So let us try to this with example. Let me try to clear this here. Control X, default arguments. What you are doing, you are only passing A and B values. But in this case, you are not passing C value. Even though if you are not passing C value, at the definition, declaration of a function, you have specified some value to C, default value, which is if you are not passing any value, it will take that value, right? In this case, let me take another example. This is also a default argument, but for this, what you are doing, you are just passing 50 as the value to C. You are passing value, so it will take this value. If you are not passing, it will take this default value. This is nothing but a default argument. If you can see 10, 20, 30, in this case, you are not passing any value to C. 10, 20, 50, 20, 50, you are passing value to C. So it will take the passed value. So this is nothing but a default arguments like positional, keyword as well as default arguments. So all these are mentioned in material. Don't worry, you should listen right. Similarly, another important point. This point you should be very clear. After default arguments, we should not take non-default arguments. Let us make you clear with another example. So let me try to comment this. Let me copy this particular thing. Let me paste it here. Let me try to comment that. What I am saying, after default arguments, we should not take non-default arguments. So let us try to see here one example. So I'm just printing that value with, in this case, in general, what I'm saying. Let me try to uncomment this. Similarly, some B is equal to 20. Suppose I can say B is equal to 20, right? And after default arguments, we should not take non-default arguments. So here C is the default arguments. In this case, what you can see, like 30. So what it will do, you are taking default arguments after non-default. So that is the reason why you got error. So we can remove this by using this. Let me try to make you clear. So it is very important point. See, that is, you should not take default arguments after non-default arguments. In this way, you can try to learn types of arguments like keyword, positional, and default arguments. So today concepts are very, very important concepts, rough concepts. You should be very clear. Upon practicing multiple times only, you will get the concept.